Ladies and gentlemen, when you are hurt by someone, when your heart is broken, it's easy to fall into despair and wonder why things happen the way they do. It's natural to feel angry, bitter, and even helpless in the face of betrayal or mistreatment. But let me tell you something. The way we respond to hurt matters just as much as the hurt itself. We must remember that there is a greater truth, a deeper understanding that can guide us through those difficult moments. You see, we are all walking this earth, imperfect and flawed. Each of us has been touched by pain, disappointment, and suffering. But in our pain, there is a powerful opportunity for growth. And though people may wrong us, God's ways are higher than our ways, His thoughts higher than our thoughts. He sees what we cannot see. When someone hurts you, God does not overlook the injustice, but He doesn't want you to carry the burden of revenge or hatred. He doesn't want you to be shackled by your hurt. Instead, He calls you to trust Him with the things you cannot control. For many of us, the temptation is to hold on to grudges, to allow bitterness to take root in our hearts. But when we allow those feelings to take over, they steal our joy, they cloud our judgment, and they hinder our peace. We must remember that those who have hurt us are themselves in need of healing, and perhaps the very thing that they did to us is an indication of their own brokenness. When we hold on to our pain, we are allowing their actions to control our hearts. Instead, we must let go, not because they deserve it, but because we deserve to be free. We deserve to walk in peace. When God deals with those who hurt you, He does not condone the wrong that was done, but He does something remarkable. He provides a way for us to rise above the bitterness. He offers us a path of forgiveness, a way of letting go of the chains that bind us to the past. In the process of forgiveness, we are not excusing the wrongs done to us, but we are releasing the power those wrongs have over our lives. It's not easy. It's not always instantaneous. But forgiveness, though a choice, is the only thing that can break the cycle of pain and open the door to healing. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing the desire for retribution. When you choose to forgive, you are choosing to trust that justice will be done in God's time, that those who wronged you will answer for their actions, not because of your wrath, but because of a higher purpose. It's difficult because the world tells us that we should seek revenge, that we should get even. But God's ways are not like ours, and His justice is far greater than any retribution we can ever dish out. In His way, He offers us something much more powerful than revenge. He offers us grace. It's the same grace that has been extended to each of us, though we are unworthy of it. When we respond to others with grace, even in the face of hurt, we reflect something far greater than human strength. We reflect the very essence of love, mercy, and compassion. And in doing so, we allow God to work in and through us in ways we can't even begin to comprehend. Now, I know that this is not easy. I know that sometimes the hurt runs deep and the scars seem permanent. But remember this, no hurt is too great for God to heal. He doesn't minimize our pain, but He offers us the strength to overcome it. He promises that He will never leave us or forsake us, even in our darkest hour. When you are hurt, when the weight of the world feels too much to bear, He is there, walking alongside you, offering His comfort, His peace, and His hope. There is power in surrendering our hurt to God. When we release our pain to Him, we are opening the door to healing, to a restoration of our souls. And though we may not understand why we suffer, we can trust that in the end, God's will is always for our good. He knows the bigger picture. He sees the future that we cannot yet grasp. And He is working all things together for His purpose, even when it feels like our world is falling apart. So, what can we do when we are hurt? We can choose to forgive. We can choose to release the burden of bitterness and resentment. We can choose to trust God's perfect plan and His justice. And as we do, we will find that the pain we once carried becomes lighter. We will find that peace, joy, and freedom come when we lay down our hurt at the feet of the one who understands it all. Forgiveness is often one of the most challenging aspects of the human experience, especially when we've been deeply hurt. When someone betrays us, causes us pain, or mistreats us, our natural instinct is to protect ourselves, to hold on to our anger, and to demand justice. We want to punish those who have wronged us or make them feel the hurt they caused us. But in doing so, we allow that hurt to control us, and we carry a burden that was never meant for us to bear. It's in these moments that we are faced with the powerful choice of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about excusing the actions of others. It's not about saying that what they did was acceptable or that we should simply forget about it. Forgiveness is a choice to release the grip that the wrongdoer has on our hearts and minds. It's the decision to no longer let their actions dictate the course of our lives or our emotional well-being. It doesn't come easily, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it is a process that leads to freedom. When we choose to forgive, we are taking back control over our own hearts. We stop allowing the person who hurt us to have any more power over us. Instead of being consumed by anger or bitterness, we choose to let go of the need for revenge or to hold on to grudges. In doing so, we free ourselves from the chains that bind us to the past, and we allow ourselves to move forward, no longer defined by the hurt we've experienced. Forgiveness is also not a sign of weakness. Some may view forgiveness as letting the offender get away with what they've done, but in reality, it takes immense strength to forgive. It takes courage to release the anger and pain, especially when we feel justified in holding on to it. But in choosing forgiveness, we show that we are stronger than the pain that was inflicted upon us. We show that we are not controlled by our emotions or by the actions of others. Rather, we are choosing peace over conflict, healing over destruction, and freedom over captivity. There is something deeply freeing about forgiveness that goes beyond the healing of our own hearts. When we forgive, we open the door for restoration and healing, not only in our lives, but in the lives of those who have hurt us. It's not easy to forgive someone who has wronged us, especially when the wound is deep. But the act of forgiveness can bring a sense of reconciliation that allows for personal growth and emotional healing. We may not always see the immediate results of our forgiveness, but it sets in motion a process that can change lives and relationships for the better. When we hold on to our hurt, we build walls around our hearts. These walls keep us locked in a prison of resentment and bitterness, where we are constantly looking back at what was done to us. We can become so focused on the injustice that we forget to live in the present or look forward to the future. Forgiveness, however, is like tearing down those walls and letting the light of peace and healing shine into our hearts. It allows us to experience true freedom, freedom from the pain of the past, freedom from the need to control the actions of others, and freedom from the heavy weight of anger. Forgiveness is not about denying that we were wronged. It's not about pretending that the hurt didn't happen. It's about choosing to no longer let that hurt define who we are. It's about releasing the hold that resentment has on us so that we can move forward and find peace in the midst of the storm. We may not forget what happened, but we choose to release its power over our hearts. When we forgive, we are also choosing to walk in the footsteps of love and compassion. We recognize that just as we have been shown grace and mercy in our own shortcomings, we too must extend that same grace to others. We may not fully understand why people act the way they do or why we are hurt, but we can trust that forgiveness will bring healing. It doesn't make everything right, but it paves the way for peace. Choosing to forgive doesn't mean we have to continue to allow people to hurt us. It doesn't mean that we have to put ourselves back in situations that are harmful. It simply means that we let go of the desire for vengeance and bitterness and trust that God will take care of the rest. Forgiveness sets us free from the emotional and spiritual chains that hold us down, and it opens the door to the healing that our hearts desperately need. Ultimately, forgiveness is a choice that brings us closer to peace, to wholeness, and to healing. It allows us to step out of the shadows of the past and into the light of a new future. Through forgiveness, we find the freedom to live without the burden of anger and resentment, and we allow ourselves to experience the fullness of life that we were always meant to live. Grace is often a concept that feels foreign to us when we are hurt. The world teaches us that we should get even, that we should demand justice when wronged, and that forgiveness comes only when the other person has paid for their mistakes. Yet grace defies that logic. Grace is a gift that cannot be earned, and it is often the most powerful response we can give when we are hurt. When we choose grace, we choose a path of love, mercy, and compassion. Grace isn't about ignoring the wrongs that have been done to us, nor is it about excusing someone's behavior. Instead, grace is the act of giving something that is not deserved, something beautiful, pure, and kind, even in the face of mistreatment. When we choose to respond with grace, we reflect something much deeper than our human instincts. We reflect the very essence of divine love, mercy, and compassion that transcends all boundaries. Grace says, "I will love you even though you don't deserve it." It's a choice to offer kindness when we have every right to feel anger and resentment. Offering grace is not always easy. It requires humility and self-control, and it often goes against every natural impulse we have when we are wronged. But when we choose grace, we open the door to healing both for ourselves and for those who hurt us. Instead of perpetuating the cycle of hurt and pain, grace has the power to break it. It allows us to rise above the offense and see the person who hurt us not just as someone who caused us pain, but as someone who, too, is in need of grace. Think about it. When someone hurts you, they are revealing something about themselves. Their actions are often a reflection of their own struggles, their own brokenness, or their own pain. Hurt people, and often those who cause harm are dealing with unresolved issues within themselves. Offering grace doesn't mean ignoring their fault, but it means recognizing that they, too, are imperfect and in need of compassion. Grace allows us to stop viewing the person as an enemy or as someone who must be punished, and instead, we begin to see them as another soul, just as flawed as we are. When we offer grace, we also free ourselves. Holding on to anger, resentment, and a desire for vengeance only chains us to the hurtful event. It gives the person who wronged us more control over our emotions and our happiness. But grace releases that control. By choosing grace, we no longer allow the actions of others to determine our emotional state. We choose to rise above the pain, not by ignoring it or pretending it doesn't matter, but by choosing to not let it define us. It's important to remember that grace is not always reciprocated. When we offer grace, we are not guaranteed that the other person will accept it or even recognize it. In fact, sometimes the person who hurt us may continue in their harmful ways. But grace is not about what the other person does. It is about what we choose to do. Grace is a gift we give, not because the other person deserves it, but because it is the right thing to do. When we extend grace, we reflect the love that we have received, and in doing so, we fulfill a higher purpose. Grace also has the power to heal relationships. While we may never fully understand why someone hurt us or why they acted the way they did, choosing grace opens the door to reconciliation. It allows for the possibility of healing the wounds that have been inflicted, not because of anything the person who wronged us does, but because of the grace we choose to extend. Grace can soften hardened hearts and turn bitterness into understanding. It can rebuild trust and create space for new beginnings. In offering grace, we also grow in our own hearts. Grace teaches us humility, compassion, and empathy. It reminds us of our own imperfections, and it helps us remember that we too are in need of grace. None of us are without fault. None of us have lived a perfect life. When we recognize this, we begin to understand that grace is something we all need to give and to receive. Grace doesn't mean we become doormats or that we allow others to continuously hurt us without consequence. It's not about enabling toxic behavior or putting ourselves in harmful situations. Grace, in its truest form, is about choosing a different path. A path that transcends bitterness, retaliation, and the need to prove a point. It's about loving others as we have been loved, even when it feels impossible. When we choose grace, we take the higher road. We take the road that leads to peace, healing, and freedom. Grace has the power to heal our hearts, to restore relationships, and to set us free from the chains of resentment. In choosing grace, we reflect the very heart of love and mercy, and that is the most powerful way we can heal our own wounds and break the cycle of hurt in this world. Trusting in God's justice is a profound act of faith. When we are wronged, when someone hurts us deeply, it is easy to fall into the trap of wanting to take matters into our own hands. We want to make sure the person who caused us pain feels the consequences of their actions. It's only natural to want justice when we've been hurt, but the true path to peace comes from trusting that God will deliver the justice we seek in His time and in His way. God's justice is different from human justice. Human justice often demands an immediate reckoning, something we can see and measure. We want to feel as though our pain has been acknowledged, that the wrongdoer has been held accountable in a way that gives us a sense of closure. But God's justice operates on a different level. It is not bound by the same limitations that we are, nor is it defined by our need for immediate satisfaction. His justice is not about retribution or punishment for the sake of vengeance. Rather, it is about righteousness, restoration, and the ultimate redemption of all things. When we trust in God's justice, we are letting go of the need to control the situation. We are surrendering our desire for revenge and acknowledging that God sees everything and will make things right in His perfect timing. It's important to understand that God does not ignore the wrongs that are done to us. He sees the hurt, the injustice, and the pain we suffer. But instead of reacting in a way that reflects our own limited understanding, He invites us to trust that His justice will bring about the right resolution, even if we can't immediately understand how. Trusting in God's justice means we stop playing the role of judge and executioner. It means we let go of the bitterness that builds up when we feel wronged. We choose to stop nursing our wounds with thoughts of revenge and allow God to take care of the situation. When we do this, we experience a sense of peace that can only come from knowing that God is in control. We can rest in the assurance that He is faithful and that He will act in accordance with His perfect will. The beauty of trusting in God's justice is that it frees us from the burden of carrying the desire for revenge. We don't have to plot ways to make things right on our own. We don't have to take matters into our hands and risk making the situation worse. We are free to let go of the emotional weight of the offense and trust that God will deal with it in a way that is best for us and for the other person. This doesn't mean that we ignore the wrongs or pretend that they didn't happen, but it does mean that we release our need to control the outcome. God's justice also takes into account the bigger picture. We often see only the present moment and the hurt we feel in the here and now. We don't always understand the consequences of someone's actions or how their behavior will impact the future. But God, in His infinite wisdom, sees the whole story. He understands the motivations of the person who hurt us, the circumstances that led to their actions, and the long-term consequences of their choices. When we trust in His justice, we are trusting that He will bring about the most just and righteous outcome for everyone involved. One of the most powerful aspects of trusting in God's justice is the understanding that His justice is ultimately redemptive. He doesn't simply punish those who do wrong, He seeks to restore them. This means that the person who has hurt us may in time be transformed by God's justice, not through punitive measures, but through grace and correction. We may not always see this transformation immediately, and we may never see it at all, but God's justice is always working toward the ultimate restoration of all things. Furthermore, trusting in God's justice does not mean we are passive in the face of injustice. It doesn't mean that we ignore wrongdoing or allow ourselves to be taken advantage of. It means that we take a step back and allow God to guide our responses. It means we act with wisdom and integrity, but without the need to settle the score ourselves. It means we allow our hearts to remain soft, even when others act with cruelty, because we trust that God will bring about the resolution that is best for all parties involved. God's justice also teaches us the importance of patience. We live in a world that wants everything now. We demand quick solutions and immediate results. But trusting in God's justice requires waiting on Him. It requires a willingness to wait for His timing, which may not always align with our own. Yet in that waiting, our faith is refined, our trust in God deepens, and we learn to surrender our own desires and plans to His greater purpose. Ultimately, trusting in God's justice means we are choosing to let go of control and trust in His sovereignty. It's a decision to stop carrying the weight of the wrongs done to us and to allow God to bring about the outcome He knows is best. When we choose this path, we find peace. We find freedom. We find the assurance that God is at work, even in the midst of our pain, and that He will bring about justice in a way that reflects His goodness, His love, and His perfect wisdom. True healing comes when we release our pain to God. When we hold on to our hurt, we are essentially carrying a weight that was never meant for us to bear. We may not always understand why we experience pain, why we are hurt by others, or why life feels so difficult at times. But there is something powerful that happens when we surrender our pain to God. We begin to unlock the door to healing, not just emotionally, but spiritually and mentally as well. When we choose to let go of the hurt we've experienced, we are making the conscious decision to stop letting that pain define who we are. Holding on to our wounds can become a way of life. We begin to see ourselves as victims, defined by the injustices done to us, and those scars become part of our identity. But healing begins when we decide to no longer be controlled by those hurts. When we give them to God, we stop letting the pain control us, and we start to experience the freedom that comes from releasing that burden. The process of surrendering our pain to God doesn't mean that we forget about the hurt or pretend it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge the deep emotional wounds we've endured. What it means is that we trust that God is bigger than our pain and that He can handle the weight of our suffering. It means that we acknowledge that we cannot carry this burden alone, and we turn to God for the strength to heal. God doesn't minimize our pain. He doesn't look at our brokenness and say, "It's not that bad." He understands the depth of our hurt, and He cares about it deeply. When we bring our pain to God, we are met with compassion and understanding. He doesn't dismiss our feelings, but instead, He invites us to lay them at His feet. He promises that He will not leave us in our brokenness, but that He will help us heal. In the process of surrendering, we open ourselves to the healing power that only He can provide. Healing also comes from recognizing that we don't have to have all the answers. When we are hurt, our natural instinct is to seek understanding, to ask why things happened the way they did. We want to know why we had to suffer, why we were the ones to endure this pain. But often, the answers we seek are not immediately available. Sometimes, we may never fully understand the reasons behind our hurt. But that doesn't mean healing is impossible. In fact, healing often begins when we stop needing to understand everything and start trusting that God knows what is best for us. In the process of healing, we may experience a range of emotions: anger, sadness, frustration, confusion. But as we surrender these emotions to God, we begin to find peace. Peace doesn't mean that the hurt is gone, but it means that we are no longer controlled by it. When we trust God with our pain, we begin to experience a peace that surpasses understanding. We are no longer bound by the weight of the offense, and we are free to move forward with hope. God also offers us the opportunity to heal in community. Healing is not always something we do alone. It's often in sharing our pain with others that we find the support, encouragement, and empathy that help us heal. In the same way that God uses His people to comfort us, He calls us to be a part of the healing process for others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and share our hurts with trusted friends or family members, we open ourselves to the possibility of healing through connection. God uses others to help bear our burdens and provide the encouragement we need to move forward. Healing is not a linear process. There are moments when we may feel like we've taken a few steps forward only to find ourselves struggling with the same hurt again. But healing is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about continually turning to God, even in the midst of our struggles, and trusting that He is at work within us. Each time we bring our pain to Him, we are allowing Him to do a deep work within our hearts. The healing process may take time, but as we continue to surrender, we find that God is faithful and His timing is perfect. One of the most powerful aspects of healing through surrender is that it frees us to live fully again. When we are bound by our pain, we are often unable to move forward. Our hearts become stuck and we feel trapped in the past. But as we allow God to heal our wounds, we begin to experience freedom. Freedom to love again, freedom to trust again, freedom to live with joy and hope. God doesn't want us to stay stuck in our pain. He wants us to experience the fullness of life that He has for us. Ultimately, healing through surrender is about trust. It's about trusting that God is capable of healing our brokenness, that He is faithful to restore us, and that He will use our pain for His glory. When we let go of our hurt and place it in His hands, we are opening ourselves to His grace, His mercy, and His peace. Healing comes when we stop holding on to the things that weigh us down and allow God to take over. It is in surrendering that we find true freedom and restoration, knowing that God will work all things together for our good. In the midst of hurt and pain, it is easy to feel alone. When we are deeply wounded, it often feels like no one understands our suffering, and we may question whether we will ever be able to move beyond the hurt. However, one of the most comforting truths we can hold on to during such times is that God is always present, walking with us through our darkest moments. We are never truly alone, even when it feels like the weight of the world is upon us. God's promise to never leave us is a source of incredible strength. When we face hurt, rejection, or betrayal, it can feel like we are abandoned by everyone we once trusted. But God's presence remains constant. He does not turn away when we hurt. Rather, He draws near to us, offering His comfort, His peace, and His unwavering support. This is a truth that we can hold on to with all of our hearts, knowing that even when it feels like the world has turned its back on us, God is beside us, ready to carry us through the pain. When we allow ourselves to fully trust in God's presence, we begin to experience the depth of His peace. It's a peace that does not depend on our circumstances, but transcends them. The peace that God offers doesn't mean that the hurt or the pain disappears immediately. Instead, it means that in the midst of our pain, we can find a sense of calm and assurance that He is working in our lives. His presence brings peace that allows us to face the storms of life with the confidence that we are not facing them alone. Often in our hurt, we can become consumed by our emotions, overwhelmed by our feelings of betrayal, sadness, or anger. In those moments, we may feel like we have no strength left to carry on, but God's presence is the strength we need. In Him, we find the courage to face each day, even when it seems impossible. It's in His presence that we find the strength to forgive, the strength to heal, and the strength to move forward, knowing that He is with us every step of the way. God's presence is also a constant reminder of His love for us. When we are hurt, we may start to doubt our worth, questioning why we were treated the way we were. We may begin to wonder if we are lovable or deserving of better treatment. But God's presence reminds us of our value, not based on what others have done to us, but based on who we are in His eyes. We are His beloved children, and nothing can change that. His love is unwavering, and He is always there to remind us of our worth when we feel broken and discarded. Even when we can't see the way forward, God's presence is a guiding light. There may be times when we feel lost in our pain, not knowing what steps to take next. But God promises that He will direct our paths, even when we cannot see them clearly. He leads us through our struggles, often in ways that we do not expect, but always toward healing, growth, and eventual peace. We may not understand the journey, but we can trust that God is faithful and that His presence will guide us through it. One of the most profound aspects of God's presence is that He meets us exactly where we are. He does not expect us to have it all together, to be free from hurt, or to be completely healed before we can approach Him. Rather, He comes to us in our brokenness. When we are hurting, He doesn't shy away from our pain. He enters into it with us, comforting us, walking with us, and helping us heal. There is no pain too deep, no hurt too great that God will not meet us there. His presence is with us in the pain, and it is through His presence that we experience healing. Sometimes the healing we long for doesn't happen immediately. It's a gradual process, and it can take time. But God's presence never wavers during this process. He is with us through every step of the healing journey, even when we may feel discouraged or uncertain. We don't have to face our pain on our own. God is there to carry us when we feel like we can't go on. And as we trust in His presence, we begin to see that the healing process is not just about overcoming the pain, but also about growing closer to Him. The pain we endure can refine us, making us more reliant on God and more sensitive to His presence in our lives. God's presence also reminds us that we have hope, even in the darkest moments. When we are hurting, it is easy to lose sight of the future and to think that things will never get better. But God offers us a hope that goes beyond our current circumstances. His presence assures us that this pain will not last forever, and that He is using it for a greater purpose. He is working in our lives, even in the hardest moments, to bring about something good. Through His presence, we can hold on to the hope that He will restore what has been broken, and that He will bring light to the darkest places. As we lean into God's presence during our hurt, we find comfort, strength, and peace. We may not always understand why we experience pain, but we can be certain that God is with us, walking alongside us and guiding us toward healing and restoration. His presence is the constant, unshakable foundation that we can rely on in our moments of pain, and it is through His presence that we find the strength to move forward and the courage to face another day. In the end, when we face hurt, it is crucial to remember that we are never alone. God's presence, His justice, His grace, His healing, and His love are the pillars that hold us up in the most trying of times. Though we may walk through valleys of pain and suffering, we do not walk alone. His promise to be with us, to comfort us, and to heal our wounds stands firm, even when we feel lost or broken. By trusting in His justice, extending grace, and allowing ourselves to heal through His presence, we break free from the chains of bitterness and anger, and we open ourselves to the freedom and peace that only He can offer. We must continue to remember that healing is a journey, one that requires trust, surrender, and faith. We don't have to have all the answers or figure it all out on our own. What we need is to trust that God, in His infinite love and wisdom, will walk with us through it all. He is working in ways we may not yet see, but His work is always good and always purposeful. Through His grace, we can move beyond our hurt, and through His presence, we can find the strength to forgive and heal. No matter the depth of the hurt, God promises to walk with us, to restore us, and to fill us with His peace. As we release our pain into His hands, we experience the transformative power of His love and grace, knowing that He makes all things new. Let us hold fast to this truth, knowing that with God there is always hope, there is always healing, and there is always the possibility of restoration. You are never alone, and God will always be with you, guiding you toward peace and healing.